back to the Accommodation Show. It's a wonderful day because today I am joined by Les Morgan from Hind Management, and we will be talking all things hotels. Les joins us from Auckland. I'm excited that you're here. Welcome to the show, Les.
Thanks, Bart. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. Look, I'd love you to start off by introducing yourself. Let everybody know what your business looks like, what you do in the accommodation space, and then we'll kind of build from there and create some stories.
Well, thank you. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of a hospitality company, really. We manage or own about $450, $500 million worth of assets in New Zealand. Our primary hotel brand is Sedima. But we also have a white label hotel brand as well, and that's where the Hind Management aspect comes in. We also have 2 day spas, and we're hoping to grow that chain. And we have a number of F&B outlets which are outward facing, so attached to hotels or associated with hotels, but more publicly facing brands. So yeah, it's a broad range, but essentially hotels is our business, and hotels has been my business for the best part of 25, 30 years.
Yeah, wow. And I imagine that with that kind of portfolio, you've had a pretty rough 24 months. I don't want to say the obvious, but it's been interesting to watch because everyone's been shut down in different stages. And I know that New Zealand was quite lucky because although you didn't have as many local lockdowns, you did actually have international travel for quite a while. Your international market overall has really fallen out for quite a while. Can you tell us about that and how the pandemic's affected you to this stage?
Yes, well, because New Zealand is so dependent on tourism, tourism in New Zealand is the largest contributor to GDP. We had a sudden and significant fall. Our borders closed completely. I think over the last 2 years-ish, we've had a period of maybe 2 months where we had an open border with Australia. So we've really been on our own and relying completely on domestic tourism. We have seen a bump in domestic tourism, but it doesn't go anywhere near making up for the shortfall of revenues. We have seen Kiwis travelling and trying to get out and about the countryside, but as you'd appreciate, they tend to be seasonal, holiday related or long weekend. So it's been really, really difficult. You could say that essentially hotels have had no revenue at all, unless you've been one of the hotels that's providing MIQ facilities. The MIQ business has been a lifeline for the industry. We are fortunate enough to have 4 hotels in that. I say fortunate enough, but it's been really challenging, of course. We've been really concerned about the health and safety of our team members. And now that the vaccination program is rolled out in New Zealand, it's certainly made us feel a bit better, but it's been really, really, really difficult in MIQ. And outside of that, essentially no business at all. So especially, I would imagine, for the smaller accommodation providers who haven't got the resources the bigger chains have got, it's been extremely difficult.
Yeah, look, and I think that I guess where you're dealing with a bigger hotel and bigger problems, then the ability to do the so-called pivot and to change things is significantly harder because you've got so many more moving parts and so many bits of your business that are entrenched or ingrained, and change management is difficult on its own. How do you feel you guys have gone in terms of that adaptability, I guess, over the past couple of years, and then kind of moving forward? Is this kind of, have you had to change the lifeblood of who you guys are to survive and to really start to think of things differently to be able to grow the business potentially in the future?
Yeah, well, significant change. In New Zealand, when the COVID crisis first emerged, we were in complete lockdown, complete shutdown, with no vision of how long this would last. In our own case, we were burning through cash just incredibly quickly. So we had to make some very strong decisions. We essentially mothballed the company. And I think we had conversations with about 500 people around their future. So that was extremely challenging and emotional and difficult. As time went on and we were able to reopen some of the hotels, especially the MIQ hotels, And they were in complete hibernation, so we were able to recover some of our team members and ask them if they'd have us back. And that's important because we accepted at the time that there's a lot of trust loss. If you talk to an employee and suddenly say, look, I don't require you anymore, and then ask them to come back, they're naturally going to be careful. So we were really...
There's no way not to burn the bridge, right?
Well, that's right. So we were really careful about the language. And what we did throughout, we had a real determination to communicate and be frank with our people. I personally decided that I was going to take a strong lead. I kept in contact with the owner, but things were changing so quickly it was really difficult to inform him of every decision we made. So I just got on with it. I got the executive team around me and we just did the best we can. And, we sort of had an in-joke, stand by because by this afternoon it'll be a different plan. But what we did determine as time went on was that what was essential was we needed to draw a line in the sand around whom we wouldn't restructure. We needed to protect the IP of the company. Now, there are roles and people who are absolutely critical, and we ring-fenced them, put some care and well-being around them, assured them of their roles, and then have subsequently began to rebuild the company slightly around that. But one of the outcomes is that we realised that we needed more flexibility in our workforce. We always thought we did because we relied on part-time or casual team members, but we soon learned I needed more than that. I made a decision, for instance, to outsource all housekeeping, which is about 40% of our workforce.
Right. Wow.
And we're contracting out a lot more roles. We're looking at offshoring more and more. I just think that the next few years are going to be disruptive again and continually, and I need that flexibility in the business. But importantly, I need to protect the key people. That's essential because we want to keep the talent. And in this lockdown, so New Zealand's going through a second lockdown, a much more severe one, especially Auckland, we didn't affect a single person's role. Not a single hour was lost. We made the decision we would stand by everybody because the consequence of putting people through a second change would be that we would lose them from our business, but probably lose them from the industry, and we would never attract them again. So again, my owner was very supportive. I said to him, I don't want to make a single change, and hopefully you understand that it's going to take a bit of bravery on your part. And he was very, very, very good because he's a good man and he understood what we were doing. So we've stood by everybody. But yes, it has resulted in a different business. We're obviously leaner and we're much more nimble, but we're much more aware too of ourselves and what we can do and what we can't do.
Yeah, look, that's really fascinating about the people side of things, where I guess if we look back at the pandemic and how it all started, we thought maybe it's going to be a matter of months and the people will kind of hang around. And as you'll know, as anyone else, is the staff have just disappeared. They just don't exist anymore. There's there's staff shortages in so many different industries, especially in hospitality. And not only that, you've lost a lot of the skill. So even if you get people that are interested in working, you just don't have that IP, you don't have that knowledge that's kind of coming in, and all those things you would take for granted aren't there anymore. So I guess, would I be right in saying that this time around, you've trimmed the fat as much as you possibly can, and then you're trying to protect the IP, as you particularly said, that the people have within the organization?
That's right. And the other decision we made is we were very careful, as I said, to communicate with people. But during this lockdown, we've taken the opposite approach. We found that we're over communicating. We're putting stress on people. When you're in your home for 100 days, there's a lot to cope with, and I think they wanted to hear less from me and less from the leadership team in general. So we've stepped back from that and mindful of that. But you're absolutely correct. There's been a whole knowledge drain from the industry. We've lost those people to retail or in New Zealand, especially construction or farming, because they're also the closed borders have obviously stopped immigration, and New Zealand unemployment figure at the moment is about 3.4%, which means you start to get down to people who don't want to enter the workforce anyway under any circumstances. So that has put pressure on salary and wages. and if you've been slow to react, then you've lost those people forever. So yeah, we were really careful to foresee that. One thing we did here as a company is in New Zealand there's a movement called living wage. So we don't pay minimum wage, we don't pay living wage, we actually pay beyond that for an entry level role. So we've taken the position to really put ourselves forward as an employer of choice, to again retain and attract that, because the dichotomy of the whole crisis is that we're an investment company, so we're looking at the future. We're about to open 2 new hotels and actively looking for more opportunities. So we also have to have an eye on growth. So we know that at any point we're going to need fresh people. In fact, we're opening a hotel in Queenstown very shortly. So we've got to be mindful of what the future holds, and we still need to build up a layer of leadership, and get that balance right between having people on the books who might not necessarily be essential today but are necessary in 6 or 12 months' time.
So this is a really fascinating point, and without revealing your hand too much to your competitors and everyone out there, but I'm really curious that plan for the future, it's really difficult to put together because you don't know really what's going to happen. We hope and we pray that in 12 months' time that there won't be such harsh lockdowns coming in ever again, right? That we all get vaccinated and life goes on, but also being cognizant of the fact that it could be that this summer will be okay and next winter we're back into trouble. And look, I'm not an epidemiologist, and I can't even say the word correctly, so I wouldn't know that what to expect. But how far ahead are you planning, and how far ahead do you think it's reasonable if you were to give advice to someone in the same position? Go, well, we're planning this far ahead. In terms of, obviously, cash flow and that sort of thing is critical, but also in terms of things like that, expansions, staffing, technology, everything that you're putting into place. What's your level of risk that you're willing to take on in terms of those plans?
Well, that's a great question, isn't it? I think probably the best way to answer that is that in previous occasions you would do a forecast or a budget. You might even do a 5-year plan. What we've done is we still need those 5-year plans for investment reasons, but we tend to do 3 plans. What I mean by that is that there's a worst case scenario, a conservative figure, and best case. So every budget we do 3 because we've got to plan accordingly. So if it's a 5-year plan, it's a 5-year plan based on 3 different scenarios, and that's important because in terms of an investment cycle, our owners look 10, 20, 30 years. In fact, they're generational investors, so they're looking very, very long term. So they've had experience, like a lot of big asset owners, with cycles, and they want to see right through that. So our business is 2 parts. One's a management company, which manages the day-to-day cash flows and operations, but also we have an investment arm. So the investment arm looks long term. Because obviously you're going to get capital appreciation from assets, etc. So they're always going to continue to be successful. But you're right, you still have the day-to-day operation of the hotels, which gives you the cash flow, to pay your interest and your principal back on your loans. So we very much split things. I can tell you that as an industry group in New Zealand, tourism industry group, we're only focused on the next couple of years. We're looking to see what's going to happen in terms of air connectivity, because that's a big factor for New Zealand. It's not worth looking further down the track. So I guess in terms of advice to people, you've got to be really careful about over planning because things will change so quickly. I wouldn't be going into too much detail about things because in a stroke of a pen, it will all shift. So I think when you're looking long term, you've got to try and keep it more high level than maybe previously, not overanalyze those things. But operationally, you've just got to be looking short term. As a company, one of the things we believe in is having big long term dream, but short term goals. I think that's important.
Yeah. And do you leverage sort of the insurance guys to help you figure out your numbers? Because I imagine that they would have some pretty good math going on to figure out, bushfire risk and all that sort of thing, COVID risk and that sort of thing. Do you guys use any sort of data analysts to kind of dig a bit deeper and go, hey, like to put together these plans and go, well, your worst case scenario is this based on all these different variables that would be used in the same industry, or in those industries to put it together, or am I
No,
sniffing
no,
up the wrong tree?
no, you're right. Less on the insurance, but we use a lot of data. A tip for people is airlines have extremely good data. They have great insight into travel patterns because they see demand. So, if you can keep a close eye on the information coming out of airlines and airports especially, and the cruise business, that's a great source. So we rely on that somewhat. I'm fortunate enough to be in tourism leadership groups in New Zealand, so I do get access to that data or contribute to it. And internally we have data analysts too who are looking at patterns, and we just try and use our best judgment with that.
Yeah, because obviously it goes beyond just revenue management at that stage, because you are looking at like pandemic coming in and out, and seasonalities kind of goes out the window as well, and what country are people going to be coming from in a year or two, who knows, right? So it's I guess a space which is full of opportunity. Now, one of the things that we talked about the other day before, and one of the areas where it's really important to look after is people, staff. And those staff shortages, it's all over the place. Like, people can't get cleaners, for example. It's just impossible to get cleaning teams and that sort of thing. And I know that you also told me that your business is very reliant on international guests coming back for, to actually make some money and for growth. So kind of balancing those two elements, what kind of strategies are you guys putting into place with your staff and with your teams, more immediately and then moving into the future?
Well, it's hard, isn't it? Because we're in a remuneration arms race in New Zealand. And so we work hard on remuneration, and that's an important word. I like to refer to remuneration like a clock, where all the points on the clock might contain a different benefit. So other than salary and wages, we pay a lot of attention to things like life insurance. So we provide full life insurance for our employees, health insurance, all sorts of benefits. A lot of them are smaller ones. But we also appreciate we've got a diverse workforce. So if you're younger, life insurance means nothing to you. So we provide concert tickets, for instance. We issued 660 tickets to our group recently, because that excites some of the younger people, maybe some of the older ones as well. So we work really hard on that remuneration clock, and we look at benefits that attract people, and we try to be as clever and as out there as we can be to make sure we're attractive to the right people. So we've taken some punt to wrap that amount of care and well-being around our people kind of in advance of the demand, which is your point, because that all comes at a cost, and yet we haven't got that demand yet. But it's absolutely necessary to be brave and take that step, because without your people and the right talent, you just won't grow your business. You won't be in a position to make the most of the opportunities that will come along, because the opportunities that come along will happen at the last minute. I mean, we know that from previous pre-COVID trends that booking so last minute, but now it's extremely last minute, because you might just get a window of a week to book a conference, and you do it and you go. So if your business is not in a good position, you won't be able to capture that. We also know in New Zealand we've got a number of major events coming up in the next couple of years, and they're going to provide these spikes in demand. So I guess we've put the people first and taken a punt that demand will come. But at the same time, we need to be able to operate our hotels in the future in a leaner structure. So when business does return, we've got to be able to operate much leaner than we are. And one of the big decisions we've made is that we'll introduce more and more technology to see if we can't aid that productivity. Because you're right, you can't have this high cost of staff and continue your way you were, especially in a disruptive demand cycle. So We're going to have to do, as we expand, we just don't want to be adding more and more people unnecessarily. I mean, no one does, but we're really looking at the types of technology that can aid that. And specifically things like kiosks. We think that anything contactless is obviously good for guests. You can now check into our hotels online using your mobile phone. You can use your mobile phone to access keys in the rooms, etc. You can order room service off that. We're looking at all those simple things. I mean, we recently, for the cost of $500, we were able to find a software fix that meant one of our administration people had a drop in their hours of 20 hours.
Right.
It's incredible for a small investment, just because we were looking at, anything that's data entry, can we do it more effectively? So the challenge really is to look at all parts of your business, everything, to see what can be done more efficiently. And there's some good examples, especially in Northern Europe, where hotels have traditionally had very high labour costs, extremely high, and they offshore or outsource a lot of things without affecting their guest service. And that's important. You've got to get that balance right. So, we're definitely looking to be more efficient.
Yeah, and so on that, you being in the management company that you are, I would have thought that you would have always been looking at technology and ways of driving efficiency, because that's sort of the business model that you would have. The difference between, I guess, pre-pandemic to now. So obviously we're saying, well, we've got staff shortages, we've got all these issues where we can't operate the way we used to. When we're looking at technology and we're going, well, now we really, really need to make a change. But before you really, really needed to make the change anyway, right? So
Yes.
what's the difference now? And when you guys are looking at the tech solutions and when you're looking at it, like my feeling is, my guess is going to be that you're trying to predict where you're going to be 5 years ahead of time rather than being kind of more reactive and responsive, and that would be the difference. But I'd love to hear from you, like when you're thinking about technology as opposed to how you used to and how you're thinking about it now, what's changed and how is it affecting the business?
Well, I think, you're right. We've always thought we're a lean business. I think every business does. They think they're doing the best thing and will introduce technology and these things will get better. But the fact is, necessity is the mother of invention. And the fact that we were lean, we began to work out actually what's not essential. What work are we doing that's actually not critical to the guest experience? So what we've done is rebuilt it based on the guest. What is the guest's expectations? I mean, it's quite common now around the world for some of the hotels, especially five-star hotels, to maybe not providing some of the services they used to do. Mini bars have gone. Sometimes you won't get room service. There's a lot of limited service hotels currently. When guests begin to return, they may bring some of those services back, but they also may choose not to, because guest expectations have slightly changed. They want probably a more contactless experience. And also we know as younger people come into the travel market, they're more comfortable tweeting a room service request than they are talking to you over the phone. So I think we've got to adjust. But I think the big important thing, Bart, is that we've really taken the opportunity to reset our thinking. So what's changed in terms of technology is we're just open to anything. Whereas previously, maybe not possible, maybe it's expensive. We've just had a really hard look at ourselves and said, let's just think differently. And that opens up a whole realm of possibilities when you take that approach. Because the basic things we must do everything differently. So my challenge to my leadership teams are, let's do it differently, let's think differently and be open-minded about it. And that's worked, actually. It's funny, it's just a mindset, because you're right, there's nothing actually changed other than the mindset. But I mean, COVID's certainly forced these things on us, yes. But what's changed is it's just accelerated. Because you're right, these things were going to happen, but it's certainly accelerated them.
One of the things I really liked about what you said was that it's the guest experience, which is number one. And in my mind, the guest experiences and their expectations are changing incredibly fast, and faster than what I can even come up with. And I work in this space as to what people actually really want. in terms of that experience, in terms of their check-in, and do they want the contactless or not, or do they want an Uber Eats delivery where they can choose 100 different options rather than whatever you've got on your particular menu in your place. And all of these things are changing. So where I think organizations used to find ways to trim down their costs based on their own processes, it's actually saying, well, that doesn't really matter at all. It's like, actually, what do we need to provide to the guest, and what technology do we need to facilitate that? And then you can find the efficiencies and go, well, you know what, that part of the business just isn't needed at all because it's not meeting what the guests are now actually looking for. Would you agree with that sort of summary?
Yeah, absolutely. I think probably we have been guilty in the past of imposing on guests what we think is best.
Sure.
Based on our experience or, our skills. But you're right, I think what's changed with technology is that guests are now able to communicate their needs to you a lot quicker and a lot faster and a lot clearer. And you have to react to those. I mean, sustainability is a good example. We're a very sustainable company. We have, our hotels are all carbon neutral and have been for some time. We're very focused on that. But when we surveyed our guests 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago, we asked them where does sustainability rank in the importance of their stay. And it was like 20th or something. It was absolutely shocking. I thought it would be in the top 5. The number one thing was a free breakfast, but anyway, that's beside the point. But today, I think if we had that survey again, I think sustainability would be probably in the top 5 solidly. So I think you're right, things have changed very, very quickly, and people are much more sensitive to that. And COVID's probably highlighted some of those things for sure, but carbon shaming is a big factor, or people's just awareness around the environment. So if you're not quick to adjust to those things, or you still think for a moment that maybe it's not so important, you're absolutely wrong. And I guess that comes back to me not having all those answers, having a diverse team around me of younger people or people with diverse thought. So that's our big call. Do we have people who've got diverse thoughts? Because the social media aspect and all those sorts of things are important and impossible for any one person to keep up. So you've got to be open-minded about it, and you've got to be very, very reactive. And we do like to try and be at the front of the queue with these sorts of things, but not with technology. Interesting enough, we've learnt over the years, if you're the first to adopt it, you're in for a very difficult ride. You're always better to be second if you can be.
Correct.
So there is a balance around introducing new technology too soon, and I'm a big fan of making sure that the technology you do introduce is helpful for the client. It might be nice to walk into my room and open my blinds and turn on the fire and order room service all off my app, but do I really want that?
Correct.
Is it seamless? Does it work? That's the key thing. So, there's still a big part of what we do is that human element and that service, for sure.
Beautiful. I did. There's another thought that came up as we were talking, and it was around the workcation topic, and I've got really hugely mixed feelings about workations, and that's more in this sort of the vacation rental, short-term rental sort of space. But I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on workations and whether it's actually a thing, or whether it's because of the fact that now we are working, or we can work remotely. I don't feel that that's ever changed. I feel I've always been able to work remotely for the past 10 years. I've never had the problem of having to being physically restrained by location because of technology. Do you think there's a massive change in the market? Are you guys getting ready for the workcation crew to come and invade the hotels? What are your feelings?
I think we've discussed it, and we're trying to adapt our product or our service around that. In terms of the workforce, we've got to be very sensitive to the fact that a lot of our people are operationally focused. So I'll give an example. What I mean is in our support office or administration roles, we're very open to flexible working and working from home. In fact, we've adopted that. So our company rule is, we've got 2 company rules around this. You can't can't work from home on a Monday or a Friday, because we don't want you to be long weekending the opportunity.
Sure.
But Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you're flexible to work from home. We're open about that. The other interesting rule we have is we don't permit contact or communication with our employees or myself, or anyone, outside of business hours.
Sure.
So you cannot text or email or do all those sorts of things. And if you do, there's no response needed, unless it's an emergency, of course. If you're on leave, absolutely strictly not permitted to make contact with us. So what we're trying to do there is provide employees with a safe zone, if you like, because what tends to happen is, we're all guilty of taking our mobile phone out at 9, 10 o'clock at night and carrying a few work emails, and that just adds to stress and probably doesn't help your productivity. Operationally, when we require people to be on shift consistently, again, we've got a really open approach for that, and we've had a number of employees say to us that they wouldn't be working for us if we didn't provide that. Mums are a good example. We say to mums, you work what hours suit you, and we'll work out an arrangement that helps, especially if you're in a more senior role where it's easier to do that. We're very open to that. I kind of have a rule. If you work for me, I don't need you to be working 40, 50 hours a week. I just need you to be working or visible when it's important. Mm-hmm. And if you treat people like grown-ups, generally, they react really well to that. But to answer your question more specifically, yes, we need to be prepared for those people entering the workforce, because that's absolutely what they're demanding. They're looking for flexibility. And I've challenged our teams, for instance, and, we've got to be mindful of employment law. But if you're a duty manager, for instance, and you're working 5 8-hour shifts, why aren't you working with your colleagues and saying, well, could we achieve 40 hours in 3.5 days? And then I could have 3.5 days off.
Sure.
So, I'm open to that, but I think we've all got to be looking at our businesses and say, yes, how can we do that? Because obviously COVID has highlighted the fact that some people really enjoy being at home and are getting some benefit from that. And I think the company can. But there's a balance. I don't think one's right or one's wrong. But definitely we need to be looking at that. And the other thing we're looking at is, job sharing with other employers. Could Johnny work for me for 10 hours a week and across the road for 10 hours a week? Is that possible? We've got to be open to that.
And do you feel that you'll get more guests expecting to have better facilities for remote working, or in terms of the avatar and the demographic of the people coming in to stay with you? Yes,
absolutely. So we are beginning to see that, people booking in just to, dare I say, get away from home, because it's difficult to work sometimes at home. And we have, we've got big pipes in all our hotels in terms of data capability. It's been something we've really thought in to make sure that people can work more easily. And you're right, it's happening more and more, and we're very open to that. We're offering full board packages, for instance, which we wouldn't have previously done, because people just want to be locked in their rooms and and focused on their work. So we also spent a lot of money and time investing in shared workspaces in the lobbies to activate them, and put a lot of attention around the types of F&B offerings people who spend a lot of time in hotel rooms want. They want a different experience. So yes, the answer is that we are looking at all of that. But in New Zealand, we haven't seen a great shift in that demand.
Yeah. Okay. Beautiful. And look, I think we've covered so many different topics, and I really do appreciate it. I really enjoy getting different perspectives from everywhere across the world, and we're all dealing with the same challenges, but in different ways. And I love the sharing of ideas. One of the things that we had mentioned before was inflation and that sort of thing, sort of moving forward, and how it's going to affect our industry as a whole. And you can see it happening out there. One thing that you said is that you're having to look after people's wages, and ultimately they will go up. I imagine that room prices have started to rise for you guys, even though occupancy might not even be there, but the prices are still going up. My background, having most of my family in New Zealand, I go over there and I look at the price of petrol and I almost want to cry. What are your feelings sort of moving forward, and how do we protect our businesses against inflation?
Well, it's a factor, and it's the same factor across the world, as you know. All economies are facing inflation, whether it's transitory or permanent is yet to be seen. But it's the biggest factor in businesses, biggest risk, bigger than immigration, in my opinion, or labour shortages, because it's silent. So inflation will erode your margins without you knowing it. I'll give you a good example. You may, for instance, price a menu in your restaurant once every 6 months. Sometimes chefs change them based on seasonality. Well, you can't do that any longer, but the price of tomatoes is changing every week. So in 6 months, your tomato soup, you might not be making a single cent on that. So you have to be, the only way to cope is to have software that allows you to change your menus quickly. And you and I have previously discussed this. I'm a big believer in dynamic pricing for food and beverage. I believe all menus now should be delivered in tablets, and you should be changing your menu prices according to potentially demand, but also inflation. You should be able to provide a cocktail at $15 during happy hour, for instance, and $25 during peak hour, just by looking at a tablet and changing your price accordingly. But inflation affects everything. Fuel's a good example. Not only got inflation, we've got high fuel crisis. That affects freight. And it affects absolutely everything. So you cannot be asleep at the wheel with inflation. You cannot have annual wage and salary reviews. That's just not possible. You've got to be doing those, what we refer to as check-in chats, every couple of months, because you need to be up to speed. Otherwise, you're going to lose someone who's going to walk across the road for a couple of dollars more because you're not prepared to be flexible. It's a real concern, but inflation in an accommodation sector, it affects every single product and service you buy. And if you're not reviewing your pricing constantly, and I mean constantly, you will become unprofitable very, very quickly.
When did you guys start really looking at this particular issue on a more serious level? Because we've got so many different inputs we're always looking at, and different ones that you're trying to tackle. But was there a point where you just went, inflation, geez, where we're starting to see that the mountain start to climb?
I guess the trigger point for us was in New Zealand. The government mandated minimum wage rises, and has every year, and they've been quite substantial, upwards of 9 to 10% on minimum wage, and that always begins to ring alarm bells, because you obviously have to raise everything accordingly. And you know that if we're doing that, is that if the whole country is raising salary and wages, minimum wages, it's going to have an inflationary effect immediately. The government might not see that for a few months, or other organisations, but when you're an operator, you see that immediately. So I think that was the trigger point. It's been on our radar now for 18 months, and in hindsight, it was probably necessary, because we've got this shortage of labour anyway. So if we hadn't done those raises, there'd be a huge gap. But yes, so it's been here for some time, and not that I want to discuss macroeconomics, because I'll get that wrong, but I would suspect it's going to be with us for some time. You've just got to be extremely vigilant. It's a real warning, and I'm pleased you raised it, because I think it's the major issue for our industry.
Yeah, and I think if I always like to give value to the audience, and I think that your key point of saying you've just got to be careful of your margins is incredibly important, and keeping reviewing and watching what's going on, because you can just get caught off guard, and all of a sudden you just become unprofitable, and the whole equation just falls out from underneath you.
Yeah, I think especially if we've been talking about accommodation prices, you may fall back on. I mean, obviously a dynamic price has no roof, but it has a minimum. You've got a floor. So you might fall back on a practice of, for instance, offering a $99 room night, because you would do that to turn to the market to stimulate it because of demand. Well, you can't do that anymore because $99 is absolutely not relevant. You know, your floor might be $150. So you really need to pay attention now to what that floor price will be. And that's important because obviously rooms is where we make most of our revenue. And so you have to adjust your thinking.
I've got one last one for you. One last question to round this out. Ancillary services. So you can call them upsells, cross-sells, bundles, you name it. I know that you're running the restaurants as well, so you've got other means of getting revenue in. But in terms of the hotels and people staying, are you guys actively looking at more opportunities to increase the basket size of your guests? And what kind of stuff have you been doing in that space?
Well, yes, we are. We centralised our reservation service 2 or 3 years ago, and what we discovered was that by not doing that, we ran the risk of not being able to upsell people, and the quality of our reservation delivery was very poor. So by centralising, we're able to control the quality. And what we've seen is a lift in yield as a result of that, because we're able to introduce, would you like breakfast? Do you require valet parking? What other services do you need? Can we recommend a restaurant? Can we recommend a helicopter tour, etc.? I think you've touched on a very important point. I think there's a great opportunity for hotels and accommodation areas to do a lot more of that, because we can now bring that in-house, I think. And technology also allows us, obviously, when a guest is using an online booking system, to be able to tick some more boxes or put up some pop-ups in order to see if we can't bring them further down that track. But it's absolutely important. And yes, we haven't quite got that right yet, but I understand that there's so much more to do around that. Because in New Zealand, especially, what's going to happen with tourism and visitors is they're going to be higher yielding in the future. We're not going to appeal to the mass market. We've made a decision sort of collectively that we're only looking for high yield traveller. That's not so. There's a distinction between a rich traveller and a poor traveller. This is a high yield one. You might be a backpacker, for instance, who stays for a longer period of time. And as a result of attracting those type of people, they expect a bit more and can spend a bit more. So the likes to the add-on activities or multiple night stays, for instance, is probably something that we need to capture. But yeah, we're certainly ready for that, and I think tourism in New Zealand is ready to adjust accordingly. We need to be marketing and delivering a more premium product, and we can't wait. I mean, hopefully we're on the verge of that. We're beginning to see signs of recovery. It's great to see Australia opening its borders and the rest of the world, welcoming travel. So yeah, we're certainly prepared, and hopefully we can cope if things go very well.
Yeah, you've been waiting for long enough now, hey?
That's right.
Look, Les, I wanted to thank you so much for spending your time with us, for responding to our emails and getting in touch and saying, yep, I'd love to share with the community and with everyone out there. Your time is so valuable, so to get a little bit of it is a real privilege. So thank you very much. It's much appreciated. And I'm sure the community appreciates it as well. Now, is there anything that we can do for you in return for your time?
Look, I would love to connect with people. I really enjoy these type of discussions, but I've learnt more from talking to you than a lot of people, and because of your breadth of experience. And as you said before, we're all in the same situation. So, people are welcome to contact me on LinkedIn, and, let's begin a conversation, and, let's get together more often on forums like this, share ideas, work together. Tourism just absolutely needs to work together now, because we've got some hurdles, and the power of us doing that will mean we can provide these wonderful solutions. And, I think the future's super exciting. And it's a great time to come in the industry because of the opportunities that present. So I'm really grateful for the invitation to speak to you and to your community, and I hope in some small way I was able to add value. So thank you.
Of course you have. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Look, have a great rest of the day, and I'm looking forward to speaking to you again in the future, coming out and hanging out in your restaurant in Auckland. It's called East. Everybody look it up. We'll put it in the show notes as well. Once again, thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day.